Yeah, that's what you mean by bucking? And that you told Will to make an example out of the strongest one? Yes. And how did you envision making an example out of that particular individual? Kill him. Okay. As you're having these conversations with Will, did he ever tell you who he was talking to in YGF when he was communicating with them? Yeah. Who? Jeezy. Do you see Jeezy in the courtroom today? Yes. Could you point him out? And why don't you pick out an article of clothing he's wearing just so the record is clear? Blue polo shirt. No objection. Record will reflect that the witness has identified the defendant Johnson. You may continue. Did Will explain to you whether at the time he was having these discussions with Jeezy had a particular role in YGF? No, he ain't never go into detail. He just say that he could handle them. He could what? He could handle them. Handle who? YGF. Okay, so Will told you that Jeezy said he could handle YGF. Yes. Okay, what do you mean by that, Mr. Gray? Meaning that he could get done what I need to get done. And what was it that you wanted to be done? Them to become Jay. Okay. Now you mentioned that you told Will to make an example out of the toughest or strongest person who wouldn't come over. Is that right? Yes. And you said that Will said he would do it. Yes. Did you learn anything further about that instruction that you gave Will? What became of that instruction? Will said one of them ended up getting killed. Somebody around there got killed. Will said that it was done. So there was a murder. Yeah. And where did the murder happen? On 22nd and Barclay. And Will told you what about that murder? He just said it was done. Okay, and he was referring back to the instruction you gave, take care? Yeah. Of the strongest person. Yeah. All right, so you told us earlier that you got out of jail on parole in '07. Is that right? Yes. Now, after you got out of jail, did there ever come a time where you went to the Greenmount neighborhood to talk to people in the neighborhood about YGF? Yes. When was that? How soon after you got out of jail? I was down Greenmount and Barclay first time that I talked to anybody about it. Okay. Who did you speak with when you went to or the Barclay area to talk about YGF? First time I talked to Stimmy. Did there ever come a time where you went to talk to Jeezy about YGF? Yes. Okay. Where did you talk to Jeezy? Can you remember? On Greenmount and Barclay. No, first time I talked to Jeezy was up on 22nd and Barclay. Okay. Let me show you Government's Exhibit GM30. Do you recognize that location? Yes. What do you recognize it to be? Where I talked to Jeezy. Was anybody else there for this conversation? Yeah, Will. All right. Now, when you and Will and Jeezy were in this location having this conversation, what did you talk about? About them shutting it down and about the situation, about the dude getting killed. Okay. About the little dudes, I asked them to shut it down and I said, little dudes run a neighborhood. Only thing Jeezy said was they don't run the neighborhood. Then I talked to Will and told him to handle it. All right, let's unpack some of that. You said you were talking about little dudes running the neighborhood. What do you mean by that? About YGF running wild in the neighborhood? Okay, so at this point, you're out of prison and you're still concerned that YGF is running wild in the neighborhood? Yes. And you go to Greenmount neighborhood and you go to talk to Jeezy about that? Yes. All right, so you just said that Mr. Johnson said they don't run the neighborhood? Yes. Was Mr. Johnson still YGF at this point, or had he changed his affiliation? Will said that he was going to make him the C. Okay, so if Will was going to make him the C, does that mean he was YGF, or does it mean he was something else? He had to be J. So you mentioned that you and Will set up a BGF regime in Greenmount, right? Yes. And that regime included all the positions in the bubble that we just went through? Yes. Can you tell us who, as best as you can remember, was the first commander or C of the Greenmount regime? Rut. I'm sorry, I didn't hear the answer to that question. The first regime was down Greenmount and Barclay. I'm talking about the regime, and let's see if we can get a map here. Let me ask it this way. Did there ever come a time where you and Will set up a regime in the territory where YGF had operated? Yeah, Will set it up. Okay. Who was the first C of that regime? Jeezy. Okay. Now, after that Greenmount regime was up and running, did there come a time when you got locked up again? Yes. When did you go back to jail? In like 2007, 2008. Yeah, 2007, 2008. And how long was it until you got out back on the street? When did you get out? 2012. When you got back out of jail, who was running BGF on the streets at the time? When I first came home, Donnie was. Did Donnie have a title or role in the gang? Yeah, he was the Hudari. And what's the Hudari? The one who runs the streets. What eventually happened to Donnie? He ended up getting federally indicted. When Donnie got federally indicted, who became the Hudari? Me. So what was the reporting structure as between you and the Hudari, or the citywide commander, and the Bushmen who reported to who? The Bushmen reported to me. And I think you explained earlier that the regimes reported to the Bushmen, is that correct? Yes. So what was happening in the regimes filtered up to you through the Bushmen? Yes. I'll show you another exhibit here. This is government's exhibit DEM1. Mr. Gray, does this fairly capture the hierarchy between the Hudari, the Bush, and the regimes that you were just talking about? Yes. When you became the Hudari, were there occasions where you visited the different regimes and neighborhoods around the city from time to time? Yes. How would you get around to visit those regimes? Either Tim or Will. Who was Tim? Dude, he Bush member. Member of BGF, Bush member. Okay. So you would go to neighborhood with him? Yes. Who drove? Tim. In fact, was Tim your driver? Yes. Who's that? Tim. For the record, this is government's exhibit PHI 89. Mr. Gray, when you would ride around the city with Tim checking in on different regimes, were there ever occasions where you would get money from BGF members in the neighborhood? Yes. Why was it that you would just be able to get money from BGF members when you went to visit the neighborhoods? Because I asked. And why would they give it to you just because you asked? Because we was brothers. They were members of the BGF. Well, what if, because I was at the highest ranking member of the BGF. Mr. Gray, at that point in time, late 2012, early 2013, were you using drugs? Yes. What kind of drugs were you using? Heroin, crack. How often were you using them? Every day. When you and Tim Hurt would ride around the city to these neighborhoods checking in on different regimes, were there ever occasions you got drugs from BGF members to feed your habit? Yes. Would you have to pay for those drugs? No. Why not? Brothers usually give it to me. I just asked for it. They gave it to me. And again, why would the brothers just give it to you? Just because they were nice? I was the highest ranking member. I'm sorry? I was the highest ranking member. Were there ever occasions where you and Tim went together to check on the BGF Greenmount regime? Yes. Objection, Your Honor. You can approach.